Hello, Mopar addicts. This is another history lesson from Mostly Old Parts and Rust. This is going to be a story about my 67 GTX that I bought when I had just turned 18 years old in my senior year of high school. I put an ad in the local peddler's post looking for all sorts of different high-performance Mopar vehicles. Somehow I managed to only get one call back, and it was on a local 67 Plymouth GTX, 440 engine, automatic transmission. Factory white, red interior, automatic on the column, and of course, as all GTXs have, bucket seats, but this one did not have a console, nor did it have a buddy seat. This was the only time that I ever saw my dad actually write out a check. We picked up the GTX the Saturday after Thanksgiving in 1987. It was raining really hard that day, and Dad wouldn't let me drive it home because it had a really hard shifting transmission in it. So he actually drove the car home, and he was the only other person to drive the car besides me. Since it was almost December, the GTX sat for all winter, and I didn't get it out until March the next year, 1988, which was 2 months before my graduation. This picture is the week before graduation, and unfortunately, due to a bad distributor bushing, the GTX cracks 2 pistons. I couldn't keep the car running and get it home, so Dad actually took a day off work early, and we dragged the car home. I had the engine all apart, couldn't figure out what the problem was, gave up on it, but Dad worked on it, and after going to a car show on the Saturday, I had a feeling to go back out to the house, and when I pulled in at the house, my GTX was running in the garage, and Dad was cleaning off his hands. The bad distributor bushing caused the distributor to kick over and close up the points and not let them open properly, and causing bad backfires. It actually ruined both mufflers on top of cracking the 2 pistons. I only ended up putting about 2,500 to 3,000 miles on the GTX in the summer of '88. Then I turned around and, of course, parked it for the winter, and in '89 I drove it just only maybe 100 miles or so. The engine was starting to smoke some, and I was really worried I'd tear up the block. The winter of '89 came, and when I got out for Christmas and New Year's break, we started tearing the GTX down. During the summer of '89, I found a really nice California 67 Belvedere 2 that had a beautiful body on it. And so we ended up cutting that car up to save my ex. Some people say I should have just transferred the parts over, but then it wouldn't have been the car that I bought. So that didn't happen. We cut up this California car and put all the pieces of it over onto the GTX. The GTX, having been sold new in Greenwood, Indiana, had somewhat of a storied history that I don't know all of. Apparently it was some sort of race car, and there was quite a bit of evidence of that in the 13 different layers of paint on the car. It had been red, white, black, with primer sometimes in between. Of course, the original color was white. This whole project was a guy's project comprising of my dad, my brother, and myself. We continued to work on the car through that time. In case anybody's curious, there's over 250 spot welds in a quarter panel. So not only did we have to cut out all the spot welds on the new panels, but we had to clean up everything on the old panels. So we dealt with well over 1,000 spot welds, no problem. And learned a lot about how the car was constructed and how we had to put it back together. While I would never call this a Concours restoration, still wanted it to be nice. So like in the door jambs, we really wanted it to look like it was an OE install. So this is about as far as we got in that roughly 2-week time span before I had to go back to school and everybody else was back and working and like that. These are the last 2 pictures that I ever had of Dad working on my GTX. The next summer the GTX got sandblasted and it had some paint put on it. Don't have any pictures of that, unfortunately. And then the next winter I was working on my brother's 70 Roadrunner, we call Frankenrunner. And then tragedy struck. Dad spent Christmas of '91 in the hospital, and then later in 1992 he was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer, and just before Christmas in 1992 we lost him. In the year after Dad passed, I graduated college, got into a really good career, got married, and also built a house all at the same time. Nothing like staying busy. The GTX sat at my mom's house from 1992 until 2008 when she moved out. And when I moved it to my new house after a few years in 2013, where I replaced both inner front fenders and started doing work to the hood and all the other exterior body panels, which unfortunately had been left in bare metal this entire time. And at one point in time they re-roofed the garage and it rained, so the GTX actually got wet. To duplicate the original spot welds, I'm using a Linko panel spotter. So you have to put the two electrodes in and you get 2 spot welds at each time. So I had actually marked where all the original spot welds were and tried to duplicate them as best I could. Also had to do a bunch of work to get all the panel alignment proper. As the weather got warmer, I turned my attention to the panels that I could strip down and get into epoxy primer and start straightening everything out. So I started with the hood, of course it's original GTX hood, and then moved on to the doors. You can see kind of how bad the staying in the garage for all that time was to the doors and the quarter panels and everything. Did a bunch of work to the front fender, repairing damage down in the dog leg, filling in the holes for fender mounted turn signal indicators that the California car had, and then turned my attention to the doors. Had just a little bit of rust in the bottom of each door, just right on the pinch weld. I cleaned all that up, got a good coat of epoxy primer in, and turned my attention to the inside of the door, making sure everything was clean and ready. Need to get all this stuff into high build primer so that I can get putting them into sealer so we can get some white paint back on. Here's the hood in high build primer. This all happened in the summer of 2013. Then later, of course, in 2013 is when I went out to Las Vegas and picked up the Dick Landy Duster. Unfortunately, after that, it was a whole nother adventure on its own, and the GTX has just kind of sat since then. It's either in the workroom or in the trailer, depending on where the Landy Duster is. So these are some last pictures of the car being out and about when I was actually working on it. It's just kind of sat since then. Hopefully here pretty soon I can get back on this, since it seems like the Landy Duster is in a state now where I can just enjoy it some and have some fun with it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please comment, like, and subscribe for more exciting videos from Mostly Old Parts and Rust.